Live from our studio in downtown Tucson. First, the local headlines.
Incoming Pima County Sheriff Mark Napier says he's going to make some changes within the Sheriff's Department. Napier is inheriting a $6 million deficit as he takes the place of Chris Nanos, who was defeated in November. Napier plans to right the ship include reducing the current 4 bureau chiefs down to 3 in order to save money. He says that it will be challenging but not impossible to have a smaller administrative staff. He hopes to have the budget deficit resolved by March and then to ruin it again in April when the sheriff's office buys that bathroom waterfall they've always wanted.
An Arizona lawmaker wants to expand hate crimes to include political beliefs. Senator John Kavanaugh says that he got the idea when he saw a video of a Trump supporter being beaten and thinks that it should be treated on the same level as someone being beaten for his or her race or religion. Dan Pagoda of the ACLU of Arizona disagrees. He says that hate crimes target traits that are immutable or can't be changed. He says it's dangerous to open this up to politics because a person's views may change over time. But the point is kind of moot because Arizona amazingly doesn't have a special category for hate crimes on the books anyway. Judges are required to handle cases equally among different groups of people. Kavanaugh says that if he can get the law passed, he will move on to protecting other groups from hate crimes, such as John Kavanaugh and supporters of John Kavanaugh.
Arizonans will be exempt from a law that requires some states to issue new IDs to travel on a plane. The new TSA law states that beginning on January 28, 2018, travelers will need to have an ID from a state compliant with the federal Real ID Act. Arizona has not yet fully implemented the Real ID Act towards its licenses, but has begun offering voluntary licenses with Real ID requirements. The ID costs $25 and is valid for 8 years. Arizona was granted an extension until October 1st, 2020. While the IDs got a pass, TSA officials said that Arizonans will still be subject to awkward groping when boarding a flight, including a customary little bit too long ball pat for men.
On January 8th, an art exhibit highlighting the issue of hunger in the U.S. will come to the Jewish Community Center in Tucson. Titled This is Hunger, the exhibit is traveling across the U.S. to educate attendees about issues of hunger across the country. The exhibit features black and white photographs of people who struggle with hunger and other interactive pieces. The exhibition is housed in a 53-foot-long big rig truck, which will travel from Los Angeles to Washington, D.C. Organizers hope the project will change stereotypes towards people who are hungry in the U.S. 42 million people go hungry in our country, with 13% of people experiencing food insecurity from 2013 to 2015. In that span of time, an average of almost 15% of Arizona residents experienced food insecurity. The exhibit begins Sunday and is free to the public.
Singer-songwriter Linda Chorney is seeking actors and actresses to perform in an upcoming film she's shooting in Tucson. Her film, called When I Sing, is an autobiographical feature based on Chorney's 2013 book titled Who the Fuck is Linda Chorney, which recounts her experiences in the music industry. Chorney is a Tucson-based artist and is best known for her 2012 Grammy nomination for Best Americana Album. She's made one other film, a documentary called Opening Act, which documented the struggles of independent artists pursuing their careers. Chorney is holding auditions from 10 a.m. until 2 p.m. on Saturday, January 7th at Southern Arizona Video Productions. She's looking for 3 roles in particular: a 20 to 30-year-old woman with a New York accent, like Marissa Tomei in My Cousin Vinny, a 50 to 60-year-old woman with blue eyes and a curvy, full figure, and a 50 to 70-year-old male with an authentic Boston accent. To audition, send a photo and resume to linda@whenising.com. Now in national and international news.
A lone gunman opened fire at the Fort Lauderdale, Florida airport today, killing 5 and wounding 8 others. The suspected shooter was taken into custody unharmed and is being identified as 26-year-old Esteban Santiago of New Jersey. He had a military ID on him when he was apprehended. Recent reports indicate he was flying into Florida from Alaska. It seems the shooter pulled a firearm from his checked baggage and then began shooting randomly into a crowd as travelers ran for cover. Eyewitness Mark Lee initially thought the sound of gunfire was the crack of fireworks. He said once the shooter had emptied his entire clip, he threw his gun down, laid down on the ground, spread eagle, and let the first officer on the scene arrest him.
Democratic senators in Congress are demanding an investigation into insider trading by Tom Price, the nominee for Health Secretary. The senators pointed to a Wall Street Journal report claiming that Price traded more than $300,000 in shares of about 40 healthcare companies over the past 4 years. Over this time, Price lobbied for legislation that would benefit the companies he invested in. Senator Chuck Schumer is leading the charge and says that Price violated the Stop Trading on Congressional Knowledge Act, which bans members of Congress from insider trading. Amazingly, the act was only passed in 2012, meaning insider trading was fair game before then. Schumer said it's impossible at this point to know for sure if Price violated the law, but an investigation would allow Congress to find out. Price was appointed by Trump partly because of his fervent opposition to the Affordable Care Act, which Price railed against as a former senator of Georgia. Price reportedly sponsored 9 health-related bills and co-sponsored 35, many of which benefited his stock picks. In August of 2016, Price purchased between $50,000 and $100,000 worth of shares in Innate Immunotherapeutics, an Australian biomedical company. Funnily enough, the largest investor in Innate is Chris Collins, a New York congressman who is on the Trump transition team. Since August of 2016, the company's stock more than doubled while Price sat on the House Budget Committee and continued to shape health legislation. Trump transition spokesman Phil Blando said that the congressman acted in complete accordance with the law, but Blando failed to elaborate on exactly which laws Price has been following.
And The Apprentice President-elect edition is looking pretty weak in its final days, as Trump is apparently out of conniving monsters to bring into his circle. Yesterday, Trump appointed former Virginia Senator Dan Coats as Director of National Intelligence. Coats served as a senator from 1989 to 1999, and again from 2011 to 2017. He also served for 8 years in the House of Representatives. In other words, a total outsider. Coats met with Trump back in November at Trump's palace, but said he was not seeking a specific position. But the press grew skeptical when Coats proceeded to camp out in the Trump Tower with a sign reading, "Pick me." Overall, Coats has a somewhat moderate record for a Republican, meaning he never pushed giving guns to librarians or accused the pink ladies of being secret abortionists. It does look like Coats had a problem with internet porn, and not in the fun way. In the early days of the internet, Coats tried to stifle inappropriate content from the web. Little did he know the internet probably wouldn't have flourished if it weren't for porn. Coats co-authored the 1996 Communications Decency Act, which was later struck down by the Supreme Court for violating First Amendment rights. Bill Clinton, who was president at the time, actually supported the bill. Imagine, Bill Clinton opposed unlimited free porn. Man, the 90s were weird.
And the House has passed a bill that would make it easier to reverse any rulings President Obama makes in his last 60 days of office. The Midnight Rule Relief Act allows Congress to repeal all rulings with a single vote, rather than holding separate votes for each ruling. Many of Obama's rulings pertain to business regulations. The legislation passed along mainly party lines, 238 to 184, with Democrats objecting to the law. Surprisingly, the American Sustainable Business Council, which includes over 250,000 businesses, opposes the bill. Their spokesman, David Levine, said that the law is, quote, like taking a chainsaw into surgery. Levine said that the businesses rely on clear regulation to set boundaries for fair competition and a level playing field. With regulations out the window, this enables powerful big business from taking a bigger chunk of the pie, since they're better equipped to deal with instability. A last-minute attempt to send the bill back to committee by Representative Kathy Castor was rejected by the House. The bill will still need to be signed by President Obama, and he has promised to veto if the law comes across his desk. Upon hearing this, House Leader Kevin McCarthy said they needed some time to review and would be done, let's say, around January 21st.
Sure, the Republicans don't exactly have what you'd call a plan to replace the Affordable Care Act, but what's the big deal? It's only health insurance. Speaker of the House Paul Ryan said that they would come up with a replacement sometime this year, presumably around the time when Dr. Dre releases Detox. Ryan gave no details about the plan except that it would seek to defund Planned Parenthood. Good to know their priorities are straight. President-elect Donald Trump made defunding the ACA, better known as Obamacare, a major part of his campaign. He has the full support of the Republican-led Congress, who are on board as long as abortion is involved. If Obamacare were canceled, without a replacement, about 20 million people would suddenly find themselves without health insurance. Ryan said that it's possible to have a healthcare system that provides affordable care without a government takeover, with the exception, of course, of abortion clinics, which would then be taken over by the government, crushed, and snorted up by Ted Cruz.
Jobless benefits sank to its lowest levels in 44 years, showing that the U.S. is steadily climbing out of the abyss of the Great Recession. For the first time, unemployment fell by 28,000 claims to 235,000 total. Unemployment claims have stayed below 300,000 for 96 straight weeks, the longest streak since 1970. Economists say this signals that employers are holding on to workers while the overall pool of workers shrinks. President Obama's last job report for the month of December was also released and saw another 153,000 jobs created. Economic growth also rose by 3.5 from July to September, according to the Commerce Department. Donald Trump pointed out that July was when his campaign began to pick up speed and tweeted, "You're welcome," for the economic boost.
A Washington, D.C. area plumbing company is claiming that Donald Trump owes them nearly $3 million for work done on one of Trump's new hotels. The owner of the company, Joseph Magnolia, says that he worked for 2 years on Trump International Hotel in D.C. Over that time, he completed plumbing, mechanical, HVAC, sewer, and water services. Now Magnolia has filed a lien against Trump on behalf of his company, Joseph J. Magnolia Incorporated. The twist is that Magnolia actually voted for Trump and wishes him well. He said, however, that, quote, "We've got to take care of this, that's all." To be clear, some people's support is so strong for Donald Trump that he can literally steal money from them and they'll still back him. Think about that. By year 4, Trump's going to be kicking ponies on the White House lawn because he ran out of obnoxious things to do. In Trump's defense, he says that he regularly refuses to pay for work if he thinks they didn't do a good job. Fair enough, but this is someone who considers good work to be a gold-plated, diamond-encrusted sleep apnea machine.
The National Institute of Health has issued updated guidelines advising parents to feed their children peanut-based foods early on. They say that early exposure to peanuts will help offset peanut allergies later in life. According to the report, for some children, 4 to 6 months is early enough to start introducing peanuts into their diet. For babies at the risk of allergies and those with a severe form of eczema, they could be given peanuts while under the supervision of a doctor while they're young. Rather than whole peanuts, which can be dangerous, the guidelines suggest puff snacks made from peanuts about 3 times per week. Peanut allergies have increased in recent years, now affecting about 2% of children in the U.S. This has caused some panic in public settings, such as schools, where some children can't even be around the presence of peanuts. Before the new guidelines, doctors would advise holding off on peanuts until age 3 to see if the child had an allergy. But it turns out waiting only made it more likely that the child would develop an allergy, so that recommendation was dropped in 2008. If scientists are correct, then you won't have to treat your peanut butter and jelly sandwich like it's active uranium. This was Luke Goodhart
and Joel Foster for 5 on 20 News.
Next up, Joel shares the latest in fake news.
Welcome to This Week in Mediocrity, where we present you with all the best and the worst of the media. I'm your host, Joel Foster, and I'm hopelessly addicted to trolling on Breitbart. This week, we saw a Twitter fest by President-elect Donald Trump, who appears to be approaching his presidency like a teenage boy who just broke up with his girlfriend. While we barely heard from Trump in any official capacity, the Donald has been blowing up Twitter, posting an average of 5 posts per day. Trump has indicated that Twitter will be the main vehicle for how he will communicate with the American public, and it makes sense because it's working for him. He doesn't have to leave Trump Tower, doesn't have to surround himself with the media people he hates, doesn't have to field any questions, and he can talk about whatever he wants, from Russian hacking to Israeli settlements to picking fights with Arnold Schwarzenegger. That's right, today Trump called out Arnold because the season 1 ratings for the new Apprentice were weak. Trump is looking to expand his cabinet by extending offers to T-1000, Colin Crisp, and of course, Bennett. But best of all, through the use of Twitter, Trump has gotten the media to shower him with credit for being like Geppetto, the puppet master of the American economy. It began earlier this week when House Republicans sought to make changes to the Ethics Oversight Committee, an independent agency that investigates Congress. Republicans sought to take away its independent status and almost got away with it. An initial vote went through, but the next day, Republicans backed down from moving forward. This came on the same day that Trump delivered this tweet. Naturally, the news media jumped on this and connected the two. Trump's tweet had to be why they backed off. Why else would they? Well, it turned out there were a lot of reasons why. The initial House vote was controversial, even among Republicans, and no Democrats would support the measure. Also, the vote was taken before all members of Congress had even returned from the holidays. Representative Leonard Vance, who opposed the measure, still had eggnog breath when he entered the House chambers. And Representative Joe Wilson hadn't even changed out of his Christmas jammies before he was asked to vote on a thing that he'd never even heard of. So there were flaws. Even House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy said that the change would never get enough votes and that the decision was already made before the tweets went out. McCarthy himself didn't support the rule change and also said that the issue was receiving a huge backlash from the public, which is a key point. But that didn't stop virtually every media outlet from trumpeting the Trump factor. The worst part of this is that it should have been an uplifting story. Remember that McCarthy mentioned public backlash. That would mean that we're being listened to, and that could have been the story. Isn't it a much better story than Congress listening to a goblin issue directives from his phone? I think so. But it didn't end there. Oh no. Giving him credit just makes the guy even stronger. Twitter trolling is Trump's spinach, his Triforce, his little flower that for some reason allows him to shoot fireballs. Because the same week, Trump took credit for a decision by Ford to keep its factories in the US and cancel a planned factory in Mexico. CEO Mark Fields explained that it didn't have to do with the tweet, but rather because they don't need to expand in Mexico and will use an existing factory. This comes from a lower demand for smaller cars, particularly the Ford Focus. So there you go. It's because the Ford Focus sucks, which we pretty much already knew, except for Friends star Matt LeBlanc, seen here on the receiving end of an HDH suppository. So it had nothing to do with Trump's tweet, unless Mark Fields now refers to a Trump takedown as a Ford Focus, since they're both unreliable, ugly, and don't run very often. But again, the media gave full credit to Trump. He's now being treated like a kid who thinks he mowed the lawn with his toy lawnmower. And like that child, Trump gets bored quickly and will complain about everything's unfair. But maybe that's the tact we have to take in order to keep his ego fed, to get him to do anything when he does something good. After all, it's great that companies are keeping operations in the US. It's just that the numbers of jobs we're talking about here aren't exactly huge. So maybe our toddler-in-chief just needs a little encouragement. Something like, hey, Donnie, you did a great job with those 500 jobs. Now, can you do it again, but like times 1,000? And maybe he'll get something done. It's a perfect strategy, though, for Trump, his tweeting, because he can take credit for anything just by tweeting about it afterwards. And he can distance himself from anything bad that happens. If anything, Trump's proved that some people can have their cake and eat it too. And judging by Trump's pudge, that boy's been eating a lot of cake. Republican members of Congress defended Trump's Twitter use. They claim that he's able to communicate more clearly with the public without the media distorting his words. The issue, though, is that through using Twitter, he doesn't allow anyone to question him like he would if he were stuck in a hot conference room with cynical, underpaid journalists with pockets full of complimentary rolls and butter. And as for distortions, what keeps the media from distorting a 130-character tweet? Now, most news stories are basically just explanations of his tweets, with each media outlet putting out their own spin on what he was trying to say. He can't clarify his statements because he isn't there. For example, maybe when he writes a tweet like this, he's not weirdly claiming to give singer Jackie Evancho's album sales a boost. Maybe by the movement, he means a subculture of Jackie Evancho fanatics who drink blood and make goat sacrifices. We have no idea because he won't answer. So until he answers that question, watch out for Jackie Evancho fans. All right, that's all for today. Tune in next week when we'll take a look at Israel and check in on Alex Jones, who, judging from every second he's been in front of a camera, is probably screaming about something. Thank you. I'll see you next week.